All right. You there, Cornel?
Yes, sir. Here I am.
All right. So we are back.
And we are live.
Yes, we are live.
Okay, so going off of where we left off,
Mhm.
Casanova Information Services. We're a technology company that provides a lot of services and solutions to all your technology needs.
Mhm.
We will be hosting this broadcast every Sunday from now on to share tech news and to also give a little insight into some of the things that we'll be doing with Casanova Information Services, and also offer some tutorials on anything from Linux to different applications, software creation, etc. You want to give a little background about yourself, Mr. Ferguson?
Yes. Yep, I'm Jeff Rizzo. As I said, I'm 31 years old, living in Joliet, Illinois. I've been working in the area of technology for probably going on about 13, 14 years. Got in technology when I was about 7 or 8 years old. Started programming in BASIC on a little Tandy TRS-80 that my uncle gave to me, along with this other VTech device that my mother got me, and a Commodore 64 that I mainly used to draw designs on the TV screen. And just progressed on from there. I learned about C actually through an encyclopedia at the Lewis University Library, where my Uncle Ron worked at the time as a reference librarian. So I played around on some of their sun boxes and started developing some small programs. And from there on, I learned about the Usenet use groups where you could actually ask questions about C, which I did. And I did over and over again. Probably annoyed some people, but hey, I was about 9 or 10 years old. And, I actually decided around that time that I wanted to be a programmer. So I started reading more about computer science, and I eventually went on to study computer science in university. And ever since then, I've been working as a freelance software developer. I've been really involved in promoting the open source community, pushing the use of Linux and the other Unix-like derivatives, in lieu of the Mac OS X and Windows operating systems, which are more closed source. But at least with the movement from Mac OS 9 to Mac OS X, they started using more open source, particularly in the userland, which was brought in by the Berkeley software distribution, which everybody knows as BSD, and as XNU, which has elements of the Mach microkernel. Right. Anything you want to say about yourself and your background?
Yes, sir.
All
I
right.
am a information scientist, BKA librarian. I really got into technology, I want to say, as soon as I entered the library field. When I first went into the library field, of course, my mentality was totally about the print book.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of librarians go into librarianship because of a love of books and reading, knowledge and learning. But I went to library school in 2009. And around that time, the world was just exploding with technology, and all types of different smart devices were coming out. And the concept of information in the field was changing, and it was changing drastically. I actually met Terry a little after that time, and Terry introduced me to programming. At the time, I've never even considered programming or fixing a computer or opening up a computer. And I quickly started to engage with programming and technology, and I incorporated it into my information science philosophies. And it really opened up my eyes, and it took me to a place where I now can understand information science a lot better,
Mhm.
and I can also understand the needs of average people and how technology can help us grow. and solve daily problems or issues that we may have. Even may save the species one day.
That is true.
I went to NIU for history with a bachelor's degree, and I went to the University of Illinois for my graduate degree in library and information science. Now I'm a professor at South Suburban College, and we're taking on this business venture with Casanova Information Services.
Yep, and you probably saw as you got more into programming how our disciplines are related, especially when it comes to information management.
Oh yeah, definitely heavily related, and I can also see more of our education system of higher learning and the division between the disciplines. Usually, let's say for instance, you go to school for communications. Well, there's a philosophy behind the communications discipline, philosophy that separates communications from, say, TV broadcasting, or that separates communications from speech or English per se. And when you take something like information science or instructional technology, computer science, information technology, there's a fine line between all of those things. And even though they seem like they're all closely related, our civilization is able to move forward because of those specializations.
Oh, sure.
In each of those disciplines.
Yeah, it seems like information science is more based off the structure of information, how to manage large quantities of information, whereas computer science is more the process of how to implement those designs and structures.
Yes, sir.
Yep. So you'd be doing, like we were setting up a database, you'd be doing more of the structure and the layout of the tables, where I would be doing more that engineering on the back end, implementing that structure and ensuring that the operations that you set up can be carried out efficiently.
Yes, sir.
It's pretty interesting. Is like, especially since comparatively, when you look at some of the older disciplines like say rhetoric or logic or even communication science itself, all of our disciplines are more nascent, so there's a lot more interplay that they're gradually starting to separate as they become larger and larger.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to see what the future holds for the various information disciplines.
Yeah, especially now that we're creating more data each year than we have in all of humanity's history prior.
Wow, it's mind-boggling.
It really is, and now we're starting to run into huge problems when it comes to maintaining those quantities of information. Now that everybody has adopted a philosophy called quantified life, where they're tracking their schedule, they're taking far greater amounts of pictures than they have at any time. They're measuring their heartbeat, they're measuring their sleep cycles, and there's just going to be a huge problem when it comes to managing this volume of information, when our technology so far have been designed around much smaller quantities of information that's not quite as frequently updated.
We keep throwing around this word technology, and when it comes to technology, what exactly are we talking about there? Because I would assume that the average person will hear the word technology and would think of electricity, or some electronic device or something like that. But what exactly is technology?
I would say that technology is probably any procedure or device that was created to facilitate somebody's plan to carry out a goal. So if you say, you could say that a cup is a technology since it facilitates, drinking compared to using my hand or just sticking my head in the faucet. Or you could also say that, speech is a technology. It was definitely created as a way to facilitate communication between people compared to body language.
So when did the word technology actually enter into the English lexicon?
I'll probably say sometime during either the Age of Enlightenment or shortly thereafter, since it was, of course, inspired by the Greek, and that's when they started integrating Greek and Latin into schools. Back in the days when they still called it grammar school, since they taught Latin, grammar and Greek grammar as a way of sharpening and disciplining the mind. But when you look at technology, it definitely has its roots in devices. But I think in the age of especially computer science, that's been since then adapted as also a procedure, because you can't really call a computer program a device in the classical sense. But a computer program definitely is a technology.
Do you think the word may be overused?
I think it's probably overused in the same sense that, say, the word virus is overused, where originally meant something, but then people started simplifying that in the vernacular, because a virus, the way that it's used now, is definitely not its original intention, and even the information science world.
Yes, yeah.
Referred to only those pieces of malware that would use the execution of another program to copy themselves to other programs.
That brings up the question of Logitech.
Mm-hmm.
And actually wanted to take the name technology or the word technology out of their name.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually want to do that because they feel that the tech issue won't be an issue moving forward in the 21st century as it is now. The word is so heavily used.
Oh, sure.
The disgrace, it's almost like a curse word.
Yeah.
A word you use to, kind of express yourself in ways that you probably, you can't, when you're at a loss for words.
Yeah. It's become a buzzword, sort of like synergy, and it's like synergy originally had a very specific meaning, but then a lot of business professionals just completely destroyed the word. It was like, we're going to synergize this, and we're going to synergize with our business partners, even though that it basically was an empty phrase. So they sort of fill the time that they set aside for the meeting. But yeah, I would say that if anything, the other thing about technology is that the further we go along in technology, the faster it advances. So those lines between what is and what is not a technology becomes increasingly more blurred as people start integrating technology into every facet of their lives, and probably even into their person going forward.
Well, it is October 18th,
Mm-hmm.
2015.
Yes, it
So
is.
what type of things are going on right now in the world of technology?
I would say probably the biggest push going forward right now is I'm sure you heard about some of the recent massive hacks.
Oh, yeah.
And the collapse of the SHA-1 hashing algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to hacking, let's define that for our listeners.
Oh, yeah. There's basically two senses of hacking in the world of technology. There's the sense that old hats like myself use it, where hacking is a creative endeavor instead of a malicious endeavor, where you actually spend your time crafting a reusable solution to a problem that other hackers can improve upon, and in doing so share with other hackers, so we don't have to spend our energy resolving the same problems all the time. So the entire Unix operating system was designed around this philosophy, where instead of a single entity, it was basically a collection of individualized programs with a specific purpose that you could sort of connect and build together a solution that works for you. Now, the media has come to redefine hacking in the common person's mind to mean breaking into entering operating systems in a digital form of burglary, if you will, and possibly deleting or exfiltrating data, or just sort of raising hell on a server. We see this with the Blue Cross Blue Shield hack, where hundreds of millions of customer records were compromised. We saw this in the Ashley Madison hack, where tens of millions of customers' records, including their home addresses, and in some cases, certain aspects of their financial information were basically shared on the black market. First happening on what they call darknet, which is a Tor accessible internetwork of computers that sort of coexist alongside the World Wide Web on the internet.
So, our viewers, I'm pretty sure that they hear all of this hacking news as well. What would you say the likelihood would be that one of our viewers have been hacked?
I would say the likelihood is probably not as low as they were probably hoping, especially if they conduct a variety of business online. We saw Jimmy John's get hacked just a few months ago because of a security hole in the magnetic strip reader. Fortunately, that information wasn't encrypted until it actually made its way onto the PC, so it was actually easily interceptable. And then you also have to worry about things that aren't exactly hacking in the media sense, but are definitely hacking in terms of social engineering, where you have employee access theft, where somebody could actually just clone your card just by swiping it and then swiping out another magnetic reader strip when you make your actual purchase. So I would say that the likelihood is probably pretty good. In fact, my cousin just got a free 1-year subscription to LifeLock because he was caught up in a Blue Cross Blue Shield hack.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
Mm-hmm.
So with all this hacking attacks, are we going to see more of this in the future? Is there any solutions that may be out there in the near future?
I think we're probably going to see more of it just because more of our life is going to be online. So it would only make sense for criminal to target our online life. But there are definitely steps that you could take to mitigate it. The chip, while not a full, foolproof solution, is definitely better than just having a card with only a magnetic swiper, because it's more difficult to steal the information from that. I think online security is probably very similar to physical security. There's no way that you could probably 100% stop it, but you can cause it to be so time consuming that most criminals are not going to target you, the individual.
Right. Better safe than sorry.
Yes. So you definitely want to take steps. An unlocked door is not a massive step down from a locked door, but it's better to lock your door than not.
Well, most of our viewers probably have one computer that is probably the most personal computer, probably a computer that's with them most of the times while they're awoke, and that's their smartphone.
Yes.
And they typically have either one or two operating systems running on their smartphones. That is the Android operating system and the Apple iOS operating system.
Yep.
So what I would like to do is kind of give a breakdown over a couple topics like price, customability, security, prestige, usability, and ecosystem when it comes to these two devices. I know the conversation can sometimes get kind of heated.
Yep.
Even pit families against each other.
So, or that's probably ended friendships.
Right.
Yep. It's just like religion and politics.
But the thing that's most interesting to me is, I'll be hanging out, say, in a Best Buy store, and I guess I'm the kind of guy that hangs out at Best Buy stores. Yeah. But I will see one of the store clerks talking to a middle-aged to older couple, and they're explaining the difference between iOS and Android. And Android seems to always be recommended, even to that target age group. And I think one of the biggest reasons or recommendations of Android that I hear is that it's so customizable and so flexible. What do you think about the flexibility of Android?
I think it definitely is, has the customizability advantage. You can swap out your launcher, you can swap out your icons. If you're somebody who really likes to customize things and you're really concerned with the look and feel of your device, then Android definitely is probably the superior option for that particular purpose. Like if you're really a tinkerer and you want your operating system be pixel perfect to how you want your phone to look, then that's probably the way to go. But I mean, that's probably not the type of thing that a middle-aged person who's mainly just using their phone as a go-to device. The main thing that would cause me personally, if I were selling them a phone, to recommend Android is just it's probably going to be a lower-priced alternative, and they're most likely out of all the age groups to be using it as a phone specifically.
Okay, so as far as flexibility and customability goes,
Hmm.
let's compare that with iOS.
Hmm.
iOS, and myself being an iOS user,
Hmm.
is pretty much locked down as far as your
Yeah,
ability to customize it.
that's one of the probably the few areas that they truly differ by a large margin, even going forward into iOS 9 and Marshmallow, because they're still locked down, which I could see. I mean, that's definitely a benefit in some ways. I mean, if you're not really concerned with customizing your phone, the good thing about it is if you had to pick up somebody else's iPhone or do tech support for, say, your parents, if you both have iPhones, you pretty much can get into their phone and find your way around really, really easily.
Mm-hmm. So, what what downside do you think Apple sees to allowing their iOS or their OS to be customizable?
I think they probably like for in their case don't see as much of a downside as some of the manufacturers that threw most of their most of their chips behind Android, because Apple's always probably benefited from the ability to control the user experience at all levels. I mean, it's a good thing not only for users, but in some ways it actually benefits app developers because it's across all the iPhones, like from iOS 4S, I mean iPhone 4S to even the latest iPhone, the iPhone 6S. I could be reasonably sure which APIs are going to be available to me because from iPhone 4S to iPhone 6S, they all have the ability to upgrade themselves to iOS 9. So I don't have to basically write my application and then sort of have it fail gracefully under older devices. I can be sure that these are the capabilities I have. This is the screen size, that I can expect to have. Of course, there's going to be a few variations like your iPhone 6 Plus, but most of the screen sizes are going to be relatively the same.
Earlier, you mentioned something about price
Hmm.
when it comes to iOS versus Android. As we know, there are so many price points for Android.
Oh yeah.
You can get an Android phone for free
Hmm.
with the contract, or you can pay $800 out of pocket for a new Samsung device.
Hmm.
Um, let's speak to price a little bit. So we know that Apple only makes one or two phones, or they make the same phone, they just make them in different sizes.
Hmm.
Right now we have the iPhone 6S and the iPhone 6S Plus.
Yep.
That phone at a base model, I believe, comes out to about $600,
Hmm.
and the 6S Plus comes out to about $800 for a base model. Compare that to a decent Android phone. How much would a decent Android phone cost?
You're probably looking at least 550 for a decent Android phone.
Okay, and that would be comparable in specs and everything
Yep.
with an Apple device. But if you're just trying to get a smartphone, you're just trying to get online, be able to access some apps, make some phone calls, you can get an Android phone for as little as $100, couple $100.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. That Android, I mean, the ceilings are pretty much close to being identical. It's where they differ is the floors when it comes to the price points. I mean, Android is willing to go way down. I mean, like if you're okay with like a even older Android phone, you could probably get away with something that's on par with a flip phone for really cheap.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So for our viewers, how important should price be in your experience? Do you recommend that our viewers go for the cheapest phone possible, or do you recommend that they get something at a higher price range? What's the benefits from the price floors all the way up to the ceiling?
The price floors would be like if you're looking for a phone for somebody like an older person who might be on a fixed income, who's really only going to use it as a phone, and maybe just check their email a couple times a week, then price is probably the primary objective. That you're going to be you're looking for when you're seeking out what's the best value of a phone for this person. But if you're probably a business user, you probably don't want to go cheap. If you're a business user, you probably want something that's going to be pretty easy to use, something that's going to be reliable more than anything else. And if you're like an active, like say a college student, you're probably looking for something that's going to be fairly small but also rugged. So it really just, you probably want to do a use case. If you're actually say in high school and you're very social, you might want to go iPhone, because iPhone has a wide variety of social apps. It has FaceTimes. It's a known standard, and your friends are more likely to have iPhones. Because when you're buying a device, you're not really just buying the device anymore. You're buying an entire ecosystem.
Ecosystem. Now that's a buzzword, especially in information science, that's being thrown around quite often. What is a technology ecosystem?
Ecosystem would be sort of like a suite of apps and online services nowadays that each device exists within. Say if you have a Google device, you're probably going to be, you're definitely going to be in the Google's ecosystem, whether you like it or not. I mean, there's definitely more alternatives available to you, but the Google ecosystem would encompass if you have a Chromebook, pretty much any Chrome OS device, Chromecast, even some other Android-based devices that run variations of the Google OS, like the Roku and a few other multimedia online solutions. It's a suite of apps like Google Docs, Google Drive. It's going to encompass what we're on right now, which is Google Hangouts. It's going to encompass Google Voice if you set up a Google Voice account to ring multiple phones using the same phone number. If you have anything that uses the Google Authenticator, it's going to be dipping its foot into the Google ecosystem. So it's basically a whole suite of platforms. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Apple's ecosystem, which includes iCloud and related services. Samsung now has their own ecosystem. Facebook has started to create its own ecosystem. It's not quite there yet. And of course, Microsoft has a comparatively small ecosystem compared to the big three, which would be Facebook, Google, and Apple.
Now, when it comes to ecosystem, the services, the various applications, what about the devices? So I can have an Android phone. I can have an Android smartwatch.
Yep.
I can have an Android tablet. I can have an Android or Google OS laptop or Chromebook. I can even have Android or Google desktop. Or a set-top box, or what we call it, a Chrome box.
Yep.
I can even have Android TV, like you say, the Roku, or I know Google TV was quite popular a while ago. Chromecast, which is actually a nifty little HDMI capable receiver that will receive any screencasting from your phone or a tablet or other devices.
Very hard to beat it on the price too.
Oh yeah, $35 is pretty amazing. Also, I can have wearables, for instance, like Google Glass, that can actually fit into that ecosystem too. We can even go as far as my refrigerator, my lights, my stove, my car, my garage. So I don't think we've seen any Android refrigerators or Android stoves yet.
Not yet.
We do have Android car play capabilities. And in the dash, your operating system is Android.
Yep, and thanks to Tesla, I mean, we might see even further incursions on the audio, the auto hardware.
All right. So when it comes to an ecosystem, it basically makes your life a little more cohesive.
Hmm.
It makes things a little more efficient.
Yep.
For instance, if I am a Google person and I buy completely into the Google ecosystem, does that mean that I get rid of my Windows desktop and get a Chromebox?
Yep, that's actually where we see sort of like the delineation between the two. Usually, when we say the ecosystem, it's pretty much a suite of service, like software-oriented services. It's probably why a lot of people confuse the word ecosystem in the general public, because usually when you think of ecosystem, you think of actual physical things.
Mm-hmm.
Or with these new ecosystems, what they really are just a suite of service providers. And Google's ecosystem, the primary service provider is Google Play services. So when you're any device, whether it's has a Google operating system or not, as soon as you start using things that are offered by the Google Play services, like say Google Docs, you're basically becoming part of the Google ecosystem. So if I could start editing, like say Google Doc on my Samsung Galaxy phone, and I can come over to like say a Windows PC at work and continue on editing, or I could hop onto like some of my friends' MacBook Pro and start editing there. And even though I'm using separate devices that in this case aren't even really mine, I'm still returning to the same place within the Google ecosystem.
Now separating the devices or the actual devices and hardware from the software in terms of ecosystems,
Mm-hmm.
let's go over to iOS.
Mm-hmm.
Because with iOS and Apple's lockdown nature,
Mm-hmm.
we have a situation where a lot of Apple services don't work on other devices.
Yep, that is true. That's a big difference between the philosophies that govern, Google, basically the Google ecosystem and the Apple ecosystem. Apple ecosystem is more closed off, which has its benefits, but there's also downsides. It's not quite as easy if you're doing something within the Apple ecosystem to sort of port it over to another ecosystem as it would be as if you were moving from say Google back to over to Apple. So if you have like say your company used to be using say iPhone 4S's, and now for whatever reason they decided to go with upgrade you all to Samsung S6s. Well, if you're it's going to be more difficult to move over all of your stuff to the Google ecosystem from the Apple ecosystem than if they were moving from, say, Samsung S4s to the iPhone 6Ss.
So when it comes to the lockdown nature of Apple,
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Google Docs for Google.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the alternative or the Apple version of say Google Docs?
Most of the time, when I see people use a similar feature, would be they edit, stuff, in whatever their application of choice is. It might be, say, they might have, say, LibreOffice on their Mac, or work, Office for Mac. Then they save it to like their iCloud drive, so they can pick it up and edit it somewhere else. That's usually what they do. They don't really seem to do software as a service to the degree that, say, Google does.
Now, Google iWorks with Pages and Keynote and Numbers, it really seems to have taken a back seat to Office and Google's productivity suite and the open source productivity suites.
Mm-hmm.
But Apple does offer iCloud, similar to say Microsoft's OneDrive or Google's what is it? Google's is it Google Drive?
Yeah, Google Drive.
Yeah, Google's Google Drive. And they actually have Pages and Numbers and Keynote, and you can access it via browser in the cloud. But the just that lockdown nature seems to keep people, I guess, unaware. Even Apple users or people that's locked into the Apple ecosystem are virtually unaware of that service, and are usually tied into Google's operating system. I mean, not operating system, ecosystem, operating within a Apple framework. If you know.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's basically think it comes down to the fact that Google is really trying to promote its software as a service, where Apple's, because they are so heavily invested in, their operating system and their basically their product from the hardware and software point of view. They're more concerned, it seems like, with synchronization.
Mm.
They much rather let you use iCloud to synchronize your files than offer, software as a service editing capabilities. It really, when you look at like Google's implementation compared to Apple's implementation, it really seems like in the Apple's case, the software as a service model for editing your documents was more of an afterthought. They're really trying to push, the iCloud, especially the iCloud Drive feature.
Now, what about security? Because as we talked about hacking earlier, where does security come into play when we get to the iOS versus Android debate? Which one is more secure?
It's probably hard to determine which one is inherently more secure. I would say that Apple, because of their closed nature, is much more ready to respond to security threats when there's something that affects its version of iOS. You can rest assured that when they do fix it, it's going to be patched on all devices that have that version of the OS. Where because it's left so much in the handset manufacturers on the Android side, even if Google does patch their Android operating system, that doesn't mean that your handset provider is necessarily going to release that patch and update your phone. And there's really no way of actually determining when that fix is going to propagate its way through with the Android market share, because there's so many different handset manufacturers, so many different versions of Android that are currently being used.
And when we're talking about those many different versions of Android, we usually call that fragmentation, right?
Yes, fragmentation.
So here's an image of that fragmentation. Can we see that image there?
Yes, we can.
So when we look here, we can see that we have the majority of users using things like a Galaxy S3, Samsung Galaxy line here. And we see some other popular devices like the Nexus, the Droid, many different versions. But then we get to the far right corner and we get this jumbo mess here, which kind of looks kind of scary comparatively. We want to explain that a little bit?
Yes, so what you're seeing in the upper left corner of the image that you had up, those are the large, basically large software companies producing the popular devices that you heard of, like Samsung S4, S5, S6 series, S6 Edge. In the lower right corner, what you're probably seeing there are basically much smaller handset manufacturers that are probably even in smaller countries, because Android has a massive following, especially in developing nations. And those are probably going to be low-cost devices that might even be running Gingerbread. Gingerbread is still being used. Its market share is decreasing, but it's still out there. And that's the big problem, is that when you actually have a security flaw in, like, say, Gingerbread, and even if it's been patched on the Google side, because these are smaller handset manufacturers, they might not have the incentive or even the financial capability to actually update their customized model of that software.
So if we were to look at, say, Apple fragmentation screen or image to compare it to this, how would that look?
You'd probably have only maybe, I would say maybe 8 blocks, maybe 10 at the most, and they would be much larger. You'd probably see, like, most likely the iPhone 5 and iPhone 4S would be relatively large. iPhone 6 would definitely be sizable, not quite as large, because it is a newer model that not everybody has adopted. But the one thing that you would see that you wouldn't see, on the Android side, would be the unification of the operating system. Everything from the iPhone 4S to the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus models could run iOS 9. They wouldn't necessarily have the same capabilities because the older hardware doesn't support some of the features that are present in iOS 9. So those would be disabled, but you would see a unification of software across the few devices that they do offer.
Okay, so with the fragmentation, there was a recent virus that was very scary, and that virus was called stage fright.
Yes.
You want to explain the stage fright virus?
Yeah, basically, stage fright was like a specially crafted MMS message. Yeah, that can include a specific video file that, when viewed, or not even necessarily viewed, if you have a Hangouts enabled device, would allow an attacker to take total control of your phone, exfiltrate it from your phone, like including contacts and other sensitive information. And the big problem with this, even though Android was able to patch it, is that it's really difficult for Google to push any patches that they do make for their operating systems out to the handset manufacturers and actually, have them do an update for their customers. So usually, if you're sticking with relatively large handset distributors like Samsung or like say HTC, or if you're using Google's own hardware like the Nexus 4 and Nexus 5, you can be reasonably sure that you'll probably get these updates in a timely manner. If you're using a smaller device like some no-name brand, or if you're in a developing nation that has really customized version of an older version of Android, there's no telling when you'll get that update, if ever.
Right, right. So just to break this down, so if we go back to our image here,
Mm-hmm.
of all of these different devices or all these different little boxes here,
Mm-hmm.
if we were to create a fix or a patch for the stage fright virus, we would have to create an individual patch for each box. Is that what you're saying?
Probably not each box, but pretty close to it, effectively. I mean, what you'll probably will see is that if you do push out a fix, it's going to cluster around the upper left of that diagram. Those are the larger manufacturers with more money. I mean, you're probably going to have to make a fix for each series of devices. Some of the devices they differ, but only in small respects, like say a radio antenna or something like that. But it's going to be far more trouble, creating a fix for all the supported platforms than it would be under the Apple by at least a couple orders of magnitude.
I see. So that brings me to my next question,
Mm-hmm.
which is durability.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about durability as far as the OS is concerned,
Mm-hmm.
and also durability as far as the hardware of your typical Android and iOS devices. But let's start with software. When we talk about durability of software, what comes to mind as far as the durability of an operating system?
I would say probably its ability to run various forms of software under various loads without locking up or seriously affecting the user's experience negatively in any way.
So
And,
when you say locking up,
mm-hmm.
so for instance, I got my phone here and
Yeah.
I'm using my phone, and all of a sudden I'm in a particular app. Let's say right now I'm opening my Facebook app and I'm flipping through screens and changing screens right away, and the phone just stops. I can't do anything. I'm touching the touch screen. I'm hitting the home button. Nothing's going on there. Is that what a lockout would be, or a lockup?
Yeah, that would be probably the most common user experience with lockups, and which could actually be quite serious when you think about it. Imagine that you're basically in some sort of serious situation, and you needed contact someone, whether it be the authorities or like somebody who can get to you right away to help you out. Imagine if your phone were completely unresponsive in that scenario.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah.
Would an Android user be more familiar with lockups, or would an iOS user be more familiar with that experience?
I think it would be probably hard to tell, compare those, especially because there's no unified hardware platform for the Android, which makes it really difficult to compare. Like if you're on a slower device, or you're on a older Android device that has updated to a more recent version of the Android operating system, probably going to be more familiar with logups than even most other Android users, and definitely probably more familiar with logups than an Apple iPhone user. Because the big benefit that Apple has is Apple knows exactly what hardware it's going to run on, so it only has to test a small few hardware scenarios. Now, if you're on like a Samsung, say S6 Edge, then you're probably not going to lock up quite that often, because I mean you're on a way overpowered phone to begin with.
Right. So, and if you are on, say, some very unfamiliar brand of Android hardware from, say, a Cricket store,
Hmm.
then lockups may be something that's a part of your daily life.
That very well could be.
Okay, now from a hardware perspective, I guess we're kind of running into the same thing. Would you say that the Apple's iPhone is a pretty well built device?
I would say overall its durability is pretty solid. It's definitely not going to be easy for the average user to seriously destroy the hardware. I mean, you could say that, I mean, you could they had that Ben Gates scandal, but that really wasn't everything they were making it out to be. Where you're like bending the phone. I mean, you're putting the hardware through an abnormal amount of strain. I mean, the average person's not going to pick up their like $600-700 phone and start like bending it to try. But I would say overall, its build quality is pretty solid. I mean, I would say that I would say probably the same of the top Android manufacturers, like their Samsung S Active series. That's definitely a very rugged phone. So I would say it's probably one of those things where really what makes the big difference is how much you're willing to spend on the phone.
So, of all the categories that we use to compare Android and iOS, price, flexibility, customability, security, prestige, UI, durability, and ecosystem, it seems that we have one common denominator here,
Mhm.
and that is the ability of iOS to be in a closed environment in
Yeah.
which there aren't too many hardware choices,
Hmm.
and it's completely controlled by one company.
Yes.
And Android, on the other hand, has almost an unlimited amount of companies and players in the market that creates many different devices.
Hmm.
So if I were to be top user of Android devices, which devices would you recommend? Because I'm assuming you wouldn't tell me to go for that right hand corner of the fragmentation.
No, right. Yeah, I would say that if you're going to stick with any hardware manufacturer, just based off my experience of following the news, I would say you probably want to stick with Samsung, if not Google's own Nexus series of Nexus devices.
So definitely either Samsung or Google Nexus.
Yeah.
Okay, so the debate that we see on Tumblr or Reddit or Facebook or Twitter or Google Plus, Android versus Apple, or Android versus iOS, it really comes down to Samsung versus Apple, or even Google Nexus
Yeah,
versus.
and I think like the debate is almost asking sort of like the wrong question. It's really not, which is better, Android or iOS. It's which is better for me.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So when considering which one to choose, you really want to go over a lot of these different categories that we went over today.
Hmm.
Actually put yourself in those predicaments to kind of get a feel for which one would best suit you and your needs, based on your daily technology needs. So when it comes to the ecosystem, is the ecosystem important? Is it important that all of my devices are running the same OS and I'm with the same company? For instance, Samsung. If I go and buy a Samsung refrigerator and smart washer and dryer, does that mean I have to get a Samsung laptop and a Samsung phone and a Samsung TV?
Yeah, not necessarily, because if you're going with a Samsung device, you're probably going to be hooking up with the Google, the Google ecosystem. So pretty much any Google supported device would suit you well. I mean, there's really not a lot of development happening across devices in Samsung's own proprietary ecosystem. So you're gonna be good. Like you could pick up, like I have like an old Dell Latitude, running Linux, and it's able to sync up with the Google, ecosystem just as well as my Samsung phone.
So of the all the different major ecosystems, Microsoft, Samsung, Google, Apple, which one do you say has the most penetration as far as the Internet of Things goes?
I'd probably say worldwide Google, because Android, worldwide has, close to 75, somewhere between 75-80% market share.
Oh wow.
So I would say worldwide, Google has the most penetration as far as being on the Internet of Things. I would say that depending on the circle that you travel in, like if you go to, say, the graphic artist industry, you're probably going to see more, Apple penetration. So really, you just got to sit back and think about, like, what I would say, what would my use case be? Like, if you're going to be in a business, I mean, businesses, you're probably going to do either or at this point, honestly. That two operating systems, they realize that, going their separate ways and, being non-interoperable is not the path to the future. So actually, iOS and Android, especially with these two latest versions, 9 and Marshmallow, are more similar than they probably have ever been in their entire histories.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
I think,
we're almost nearing the close of our time here.
yep.
I know we did get off a little rocky in the beginning.
Yeah, we had some technical, especially internet issues. They're out working on Essendon Road again, like they always do, and that always gives my utilities, usually either Power or Comcast, a little trouble.
Well, there you have it, folks. It was our first episode of Tech Talks with Terry.
Yep.
We will be broadcasting every Sunday.
Yep.
We will try to keep a consistent time,
Mm-hmm.
Usually around 10 o'clock or 11.
Yep.
And we'll definitely share on Facebook, Twitter, and all the social networks to keep our viewers apprised of when we'll be airing, and letting you know about some of the conversations that we're going to have in advance. Terry, we will be having a blog, correct?
Yes, we will be having a blog, and then we'll be posting some articles as well as links to our past episodes of Tech Talks with Terry.
Okay. So any closing remarks?
I would just say that if you're looking for any sort of web design, or if you're looking for a custom app, make sure you check out Casanova Internet Services. We'll be sharing the Facebook post, so you can get in touch with us if you need app or website development needs. And if you're looking for an HTPC, we can custom build pretty much any HTPC, and even ship it to you if necessary. So if you're out of our local area, don't be afraid to order from us.
Sounds like a segue into next week's show.
Yes, it is.
All right. This is Terry Ferguson and Cornel Darden Jr., Casanova Information Services, signing off. Have a great Sunday.
All right. Take care, everybody.